was sharing screen, so I'm going to check it on this page here to see what the fuck is going on. Hello, the world. Welcome to the world of fuckery. Let's see if this has worked. We are streaming. I hope we are streaming. I really, really hope. Nope, it is not showing we are streaming. It says the live is starting. Come on, Facebook. Retry. Dismiss. Hey, there we go. I think I got it. All right. Refreshing the page, double checking. Yes, there we are. Okay, cool. We are both here. So, Rex has been interacting with this system all afternoon. Rex, would you please do me a favor and describe the sort of effects that you've been having with this system of magic this afternoon?
Sure. Well, it's been very interesting these last few hours, especially. The comparison that I will note, the main comparison and difference between the system of magic and other systems that I've worked is that when dealing with the system of magic itself being plugged into this current and undergoing the rites of transformation, of initiation, and whatnot, it seems like all of the senses are honed and focused psionically, and that the actual medium of manifestation is felt in a multi-dimensional way, which means that if I do a conjuration, can cast for something and do a summoning. For example, we did a creation of an elemental for my wand. If I do that and I say this thing, it not only links me and the physical conduit through, our terrestrial vehicles, but as we're conjuring each realm and dimension, each of those things have a specific signature that they give off that you can interpret and thus get to know and understand better the nature of the entity that you're working with. This results in various means of manifestation, everything from being able to see the actual pattern of the spirit forming on the tip of the wand and seeing the apparition form in the negative space around the energy that is coming off of the wand, being able to feel it, affect the aura and the body, to produce equilibrium and to have a effect over one's own mind, even in mental plane, to be able to cause what's the word I'm looking for? Furthering of one's equilibrium to be balanced rather than to throw it out of whack and displace it, which certain systems that I've noted were doing, whether that's because of the fact that the conduit's not being distributed and across one's own consciousness evenly, or whether there's not a binding element or agent to the system, and so the magic is like skittering across your whole person at different levels because it's not accurately displacing itself in the world.
Can you name such systems that you've studied?
Yeah, oh yeah. We're going to do the call-out method, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, as much as I was fond of certain personalities there, the Golden Dawn would be one. The AA system. These are systems that attempted to take a good chunk of all magical dogma and ideology and doctrine and convert it into a singular omnibus that, while I think the intention behind it was good, the practicum may not have been, may have been leaving a little bit to desire, because the manifestation would take a while to be seen. The initiatic rites were very long delayed, and so therefore the student could easily be thinking that even their rites of initiation were bullshit. You could end up doing more and more and more if you're like me. I wasn't even impatient for it. I knew that certain things took a while to manifest it, but I realized also that this didn't always have to be the case. So I kept searching throughout different systems, which led me to chaos magic, which produced more tangible results, you know what I mean? More practical results, the ability to survive, to gain money, to gain the basic necessities for oneself through magical conduit means. And with this system, I could see that being even more powerful because it takes the idea of lineage and it takes that same type of steadfastness that you gain from a current of magic, but it takes the practicum into consideration. Because when you have these manifestations, even just at the spirit level with conjuration and whatnot, with gaining answers and information via pendulum, which Brian was showing earlier, you have a better chance of working out for yourself a basis of spellcraft that is not only effective but is practical and will yield the same results time and time again. This is my third or fourth experience with the system, and it's been yielding the same amount of results each time.
What all have you experienced today?
So we've dealt with a lot of astral magic and tying it into the body, like I said, through different conduits, through the emotions, through the mental plane, through the physical body, producing sensations, phantasmagoria, to different spirits, helper spirits, pendulum work, the crafting of sacred spaces to absolutely change one's immediate perception of reality, which is very, very, very helpful if you're trying to craft a spell and you don't want other people's reality leaking into yours and influencing you. That way you can craft and have a fresh space to do your thing. The production of magical lightnings and such, and defensive magics, so to speak, offensive.
What could you describe as far as the offensive capacity for our work today?
The authentic capacity, you said?
Offensive capacity.
Oh, okay. With such tangible grounding results, finding home in a physical plane, in a terrestrial plane, I can look at it as a devastating way of performing magic. I mean, it's, if you needed to defend yourself or somebody that you cared about, this type of magic would be an instantaneous way of either diverting and reflecting whatever energy, or transmuting it, transforming it, whatever application you sought to do, and it would be instantaneous. There wouldn't be any craft thing, cast the thing and hope that, it doesn't take a couple of days before it seeds effect and that we're not all fucking dead or wishing we were dead in the meantime.
So now here's a question I have for you. You took an inanimate object that had no soul and no spirit. Were you able to notice an effect when you applied my methodology to said object?
It has more of a ring to it. It seems bigger. It has extra dimensions to it. It has weights and balance and checks. It has the ability to communicate vis-a-vis the realm of symbols and emotion. So it connects at a visceral level. You can feel it, as well as see it, as well as touch it, as well as taste it. There were different sensations. There were also different sensations to your ones as well, which is interesting because it shows sort of creative link and signature and sympathy between the two.
What would you say to the new people that are experiencing this current for the first time?
Um, Pull generously, but definitely have an intention for the effect. You know what I mean? Because the wording in and of itself is done very well for each of the spells. They're crafted to a nicety, which means that each word is weighed by something that the magician has done or is a part of their conscientiousness. It's not just idle masturbatory words that you're speaking because you know are doing so out of desperation. This is something that's crafted. It's been etched in the halls of time, and it's a reflection of the current in and of itself. So each time you speak it, you're speaking life to whatever basis that you're trying to work with. So if you're doing a metal material basis for a talisman, if you understand that spirit of fire, and if you understand that part of the current, if you understand the gate that you're asking to manifest inside of you and outside of you, and if you understand how those things work, then you'll be able to really merge with that talisman and get the most out of this. Even I, as somebody who is new to this current, I haven't really had to work for it so much, despite my other failings and successes and misgivings toward other systems. It's all superfluous, so to speak, because the actual force that it channels is a raw conduit of creation, and that in and of itself supersedes all systems of symbol, any of it. I mean, you've just only to imagine what you want to do, apply the intent to the word, and it manifests.
How do you feel of this in relation to the other systems that you studied? What has yielded you the most results within the shortest amount of time?
Definitely, this has been more put together as far as that goes. I've only applied this on an astral level to plain creation so far, and that's been more cohesive. Okay, when we talk about the formulation of spirit, I tried to do that in several other systems, and it was, I mean, I pulled a raw Hellcat, right? But I had to have a physical conduit and basis. With this, I know that I didn't have to, because we were working it without the wand. We worked the astral magic beforehand, and I was, seeing, feeling, experiencing different levels of energy, crafted around my hands. This is something that I wasn't able to pull on and generate by myself beforehand. So I would say that the system is more, what's the word I'm looking for? Tangible. Tangible is a good word. The other systems were discombobulated because where they didn't manifest in a physical realm, that's where you wanted it. You wanted to see, okay, well, I'm done with the spell. I don't have to wait, a week or 2 weeks to see any kind of weird things happening around my immediate domain, or before it starts affecting my reality and the way my mind works. This was very cohesive. It's like putting all of your ducks in a row, so to speak.
So, my question for you is, with the Rite of Transformation and the experiences and the changes that you've experienced in your physical body, are they as visceral as I would warn people against if they have sensitivities to such things?
Oh, for sure. Well, 100% without a doubt. But I also don't think that that's a bad thing either going in, because, for example, doing things like the Rite of Transformation is definitely something that is I would say that there are certain markings within the metaphysical realm that one can't get around, and that's one of those things when you're attuning. It's very intense, or at least it was for me. However, that being said, I think one of the things that can help balance the equilibrium is something like we went through tonight with the creation of spirit. You know what I mean? Just having that presence around one helps have a conduit for the current that you're wielding now once you're plugged in through the Rite of Transformation to focus on. You know what I mean? You're able to hone it on something rather than just kind of, letting it be a big blob that just kind of sits in your auric field, vast reserve for you to call upon, but you never do because maybe you don't see the creative ingenuity and how to apply it, right off the bat, or, whatever. But once you have those ideas and you begin making that headway, creating of spirits and servitors, talismans, flinging forth spells, trying to affect the world immediately around you, that conduit is linked in such a way that there's no blowback from drawing off that current. Not that I've experienced it.
So, what would you say to those people that are going to seek to undergo such a transformation?
I would say that there's no real way to prepare yourself for such an initiation. Not in my mind, anyway. Unless you're prepared for a complete shift, you know what I mean? I had immediate results and change of personality afterwards. Certain aspects of what I deemed myself were still there. My memories were intact. Wasn't like Men in Black. There was no brain drain technology, thankfully. But I did feel that as my personality changed, certain elements that were submerged became sharper. For example, when I took this element on and I would sleep at night, I was having a lot of restlessness before. And even with like stones and crystals and whatnot that are supposed to aid with that facilitation of those things. Well, this Rite of Transformation sharpened all my skills of perception to new heights, new levels. Previously, not before magic, didn't necessarily give skills, but made me aware of different ways to use the things of which I already possessed, that it was amplifying and strengthening at the core. And even though I was so plugged in, I was able to, via Brian's suggestions, inadvertent suggestions as well. They weren't openly, suggested, but I was able to kind of fling it off and find a place of rest, even within all of the noisomeness that came from attuning to those levels of creation. And when I woke in the morning, I noticed that the transformation was definitely still valid. So if you're going to undergo something like this, I would definitely say do so with a somber mind and understand that you're going to have the ability to attune yourself in ways you probably never imagined, connecting with your reality. So pay very close attention to all parts of yourself. You know what I mean? How you think, how you feel, how you're acting. If you have certain impulses that are normally present, note the absence of those, or the growth of new ones, because this is ways that the current is going to express itself through you. And it'll be a new way for you to manifest your magic. For me, I'm starting to think now in ways, just through looking at the verbiage of the spells, the way that the spells are worded, that I can access those different pockets of magic in me and apply them differently. So
So, what would be some of the manifestations that you've experienced tonight that you haven't been able to beforehand or without previous preparation?
Um, the activation of small pocket realities like that, to where you're able to quite literally just pull them out of the aether. These are things that aren't really discussed openly in a lot of systems. It's kind of hinted at and whatnot through the text and through the reading, uh, and then using like spirit possession and whatnot to experience these things. They do it without so much necessarily always explaining what the fuck it is that they're doing. And so you're like, oh, that was cool. Can you show me how to do that? And now you're just this magical junkie that's like trying to chase the fucking dragon's tail rather than actually understanding what the fuck it is you're doing. So being able to do that just because of the fact that you're plugged into this conduit and you can call forth those gates of creation and just weave a certain specific type of energy, that's it's a pocket reality all of its own, and it has specific, geometric components that it's made up of, and there's all types of density, and you can literally feel the pressure around your hand, but then the lightness of the actual material material, and to see how those two things are contrasted, it's almost like holding a piece of art. You know what I mean? There's the frame, and then there's the actual piece itself, the actual painting. Um,
So, we conjured down a bunch of variety of elements tonight.
yep.
What would you suggest is, or what would you describe as each of them?
Um,
There were a lot. So, just pick your top three favorites.
yeah. I would have to say the the chaos, or the chaos energy, was very interesting because it was not like any of the other ones. There was no dimension or shape. There was infinite potentia, and that's what you get the feeling of. Is that there's this real raw, and even though it is anchored, you're in no means in danger when you're working with this. When you're in the driver's seat with it, you get that feeling that there is. So there's this underlying, I want to say almost dissatisfaction. You know what I mean? Because it's like a need to breathe. You know what I mean? It's unsettled, and that was interesting. The well that we conjured, um, from both heaven and hell, that was very interesting as well, because that felt like you're utilizing multiple forms of your astral body, are kind of coming together in order to dip from this well of creation. You know what I mean? And that's something that's interesting because it felt like it was that chaotic seed, but a little bit more pronounced. You know what I mean? Like it was tangible now.
Right.
Like it was coming forth into being from the two different states.
And that's exactly what it was. Is it's like you are the conduit between the light and the dark, and then so forth. You are conjuring the well of creation as a wellspring. You are the wellspring in this case for that conjuration. So, what would you say is the most dense energy you experienced tonight?
That was definitely the second one that we pulled out, the one that had the lighter geometries in the middle. And the reason why I say that was denser than the other is because when you look at the contrast and the comparison in between the two different points of the actual energy, You know what I mean? The outer rim and then the actual like inner core. They were made of two completely different things. So it made it feel a lot fucking heavier on the edges because it was noticeable. You know what I mean? You could feel the outer density warping, and then on the inside of that energy was just this. It almost was like velvet, you know. Either that or the point where my equilibrium was resting in front of my eyes and behind the back of my head. Those two points that were like circumnavigating, those were pretty like physical. I could feel it actually like blurring my aura and like moving parts of me. That was interesting.
So what was the word and what was the effect that you experienced when you conjured the void lightning?
Um,
It was that Tibetan word.
oh, right. Trungpa, which was interesting because, like we were talking about, with the void lightning, I was thinking that the only reason why that came through is because of that was my psyche's way of like referencing it. It was its only way of like trying to explain to me, express to me what kind of energy I was uh, dealing with. And what I found funny was when I looked at Trungpa. Trungpa was the Tibetan Buddhist, and we mentioned the lightning Buddhist sect, which would be, you know, the Vajrayana. So you got that. The effect of it was pretty interesting because I could actually see white light in my hands, and it almost looked like it was in the form of a scroll or something like that that was laid out. I could see the dimensions and whatnot. Um, there were diamond bits that were kind of like interlocking that were moving in and out. And I could feel the subtle force pulsing through my hand, almost as if I had a hand over top of mine, um, that I was able to push out.
So that's the second evocation that we did tonight. Can you explain the grail and the cup that you experienced?
Yeah, trying to remember which one that was after when I viewed it. It was right after we did that, yeah.
Yeah. Or no, I think it was right before we did that one
Okay, yeah, you're right.
because it was the spark of creation.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me.
Sorry guys, we've been at this for like a long time today. This is the result of a long day of work. Like, before you get into that, how would you experience today as far as practicum teaching that you've experienced?
It's a lot better than when I was doing it by myself, or any other way, because there would be a there would be a long series of, you know, doing the thing to try to get you prepared to mentally come at the thing, and then after you've done that, which take about probably 2 or 3 fucking weeks, takes fucking forever before you're actually doing any actual practical sorcery. You know, you've usually at that point lost the will to actually cast the fucking spell.
Right? Shit.
It's kind of hilarious, actually, and counterintuitive to the process, but I digress. Um, so it's as far as the practicum goes, there's a lot that's being gone over and digested, and kind of just have the ability to go back over it and reintegrate it daily and see how the magic affects you, from those different points of view. Matter of fact, after we close up here, I do believe I'm going to
Pass out?
kind of do a, well, yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna do a meditation while I was going off to bed and try to actually do a little bit of casting and astral work there.
Oh, that'll be fantastic. So, if you could say, if we could demonstrate anything What would you like me to be able to demonstrate to our audience as far as practicum goes within the next 5 minutes or so?
Oh shit. Well, I think that a good area to start at is I really like a lot of the astral stuff. Personally, dealing with the density of energy and whatnot, but I also really think the pendulums, like you were using earlier, are a really good medium because it's a means of showing and of telling, and a means of just connecting a few different areas into a practical ritual. You know what I mean? You can ask it a question, you can see it, you've got visible, visceral proof and evidence right there.
So, my friends, if you will permit me, this way is north, this way is south. Close to the camera is east, close to the camera is west. We are streaming on Facebook. So, spirits of the air, I call you forth. Will you respond to me as I require? North is yes, south is no. I am holding the initial bead with 2 fingers. This is moving north to south. Release. What would you like me to ask it?
Oh.
It's going in circles. And this is
What do you think the outcome will be for magic this school?
So the Academy of Sorcery is a 501c3. It is designed as an urban fellowship concept. Will we serve our community as occultists? North, south, yes. East, west, no. Will we serve if we do a wholesale application? Can we prescribe a fellowship? My hand is straight. That is yes. Release.
There you have it, folks. The proof's in the pudding.
So the Academy of Sorcery is a thing that must occur, according to the spirits of the air. So, do you have anything that would be a summation of today's lessons for you, Rex?
Yes, I do actually. I would say that today's lessons were focused and based on the accruing of practical evidence for the magician, okay, which is very important, that you see the results manifest, and that these things were done and gone about through various mediums, professionally blending them together to open up one's mind, body, and spirit for the better broadcasting of occult arcane energies. And it was a lot of fun, which is cool. Yeah.
I love it. So, I mean, it's like today has been an amazing day. Like, I know we didn't do the right in the afternoon, but this pretty much covers the right in the afternoon because we've been doing this all afternoon. Like,
Yeah.
just imagine what would happen if you actually like paid for services. Would you do that?
Oh yeah.
Like, both like lessons and for like if you need practical sorcery.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you feel about becoming a practical magician that did paid services yourself using this system of sorcery?
I think that it would be very beneficial because I think that it's one thing to actually have the work done for you. You know what I mean? Especially if you get caught up in your own shit, you don't have enough time. Whatever it is, what it is. Then you have practicum that you can have launched at you, from a lot of different people who do it in a lot of different ways. But if you're wanting to take a more laid back approach and actually understand more about your life and have that kind of control over your life and understand why that happens the way that it does, sorry, I should say sorcery happens the way it does, then I would definitely suggest this as a viable conduit to learn.
And so, like today, we talked about many different approaches for being able to integrate this into an individuation of systems, meaning that if someone had a banner hanging in their house, they would be able to call this forth. And via tied to the land in a sort of personal workshop, if one was able to visit the land that I own in Colorado, and we were able to turn it into a nexus point for the rest of the United States, would this be something that should be beneficial to others?
I think so. Especially because the just focusing the intent right now without even having to. And I have to sit there and visualize and go through all of this stuff. It was just saying a few words, having them plugged into the current, and all of a sudden you're witnessing, manifestation on another level. So, imagine the implications there for something like a banner, connecting people across the miles to each school. You have the ability now to manifest in your own home, if need be, and join people astrally at a conclave sort of thing, meet up and foment.
Exactly. Yay to the witches' Sabbat, where we travel across the plains via our spirit familiars that we create, right? And tonight you were able to create such a familiar, yes?
Oh, yeah.
What would you suggest would be the best way to create such a familiar with someone who is new to the system?
Well, I like the way that we did it with the one personally, but I think it should be, for me, I would say that it would be beneficial if the item that it is to be housed in is of importance or of value to the person. This was the least strenuous formulation of a spirit that I've ever gone to.
And how did you come by the? Sorry if I seem a little off sorts. How did you come by the vessel by which the spirit manifested itself in?
Oh, I actually ended up having right before I came to Tampa for the first time, I had a walking stick that I had been using as a staff, and I just got growing tired of something that heavy and cumbersome. I didn't want to walk around with it anymore. I felt like it was just kind of served its purpose, and I hadn't really bonded with it. You know what I mean? I'm very, very picky when it comes to material basis for items like that. So I went in the woods in Vero Beach, which is just slightly north of my hometown, and I put my walking stick back there at the entrance of the forest, and I ended up walking through the woods and traded off for the one that I now have, which kind of came almost as if it was turned on the lathe. It was formed perfectly. So, yeah.
That's delightful. What would you say to those people that are looking for professional turned, like we discussed earlier, numerous variations of creating wands for our constituency, like our students, our members? What would you say to them in relation to the sort of thing that you found via the woods?
I would say that that's a really great way of doing it as well, because depending on your level of access to your own intuitive faculties and the ability to kind of just stumble upon something like that, if you should happen to find it, I would definitely save it, and then don't be afraid when you're networking to find somebody as a part of the school who is into that kind of thing, or if you yourself are into that kind of thing, you know, you could come upon a lathe and whatnot and make it in a part of the magical school. That way you're around people who, you know, are kind of sharing in that essence, because when you are plugged into a current of magic, you're tied directly to the source. And if everyone's working from the same source, then that means we're all plugged in one way or another anyway. So by utilizing techniques that others may give you ideas that they may help you with, or by just utilizing your own intuition, thereby you might come across the creation of something that not only aids you in your magic, but in your day-to-day life, you know, which is very, very important, I think, because the more that you bond with it, the more that you're able to draw from that current connected to it, and the more that the current of energy and people are enriched, you know, you and everyone else, the whole conduit flourishes, you know.
So here's a question I have for you. There is Peter Carroll's 163 and the DKMU. And then there is this. What yields more vibrant results?
Definitely this.
How so?
Well, and that's the thing, is I'm having a hard time putting my finger on a lot of it, because this nuances are so subtle. And what's actually interesting too is the manifestation itself is subtle. The nuances that connect them together they're like little fingers. They're like little intricate interlocking fingers that move through you. And now this is the interesting thing as well. I'll say this. For anyone out there who's ever worked vision magic of any type, this is not disorienting. I never at any point in time felt myself confused or dazed, or like I was like missing chunks out of the process or my own memory or anything like that. There was never anything like that. There wasn't any kind of absolution or anything like that. It's straight up like being plugged into a conduit, and as you pronounce the words clearly and firmly, there was a calming sensation that came over and a very centeredness. I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned, I know I mentioned it to you, obviously, Brian, but I don't know if I mentioned it on here. I was feeling clear-headed after doing some of the invocations, which I was noting was an effective meditation, you know, that can occur if you sit there and meditate and chant for a few hours. Then you get to the point where you almost feel high, you know what I mean? You feel very light and airy and clear-headed and whatnot, very centered in yourself. And so this is like doing all of that without taking 2 hours, you know. It's a matter of minutes, you know, 2-3 minutes at the most, you know what I mean? We were in the creation of the elemental of the wand. It was instantaneous. Yeah. There was no lag on that at all.
So you've got the wand of, like, I'm going to shit on you guys for a minute, the OTO and the Golden Dawn. Yeah. The wand of many colors with all the sigils that don't mean shit. Compared to the wand that was conjured from the gates of the earth, the fire, the water, the air. How would you relate those two ingredients together compared to the experience that you've had of making both?
Oh God, it's no contest. I mean, I hurt myself through making the other one, so that should tell you something. It had all kinds of wonky side effects.
Such as what?
I never could actually manifest anything with it.
And tonight, did you manifest a spirit?
Oh yeah.
Did you get to
Oh
see?
yeah.
Did you
I
get to
wasn't
see?
actually having to try to look. I mean, I was having full-on immersive astral, connection with the thing, powering one another. So it was going through symbolic gate and showing me the reference there of bonding and whatnot. I was seeing the Sigillium Daemeth, so it was connecting to me via across magical, traditions and whatnot. Well, that was very interesting as well.
And so we've done a variety of things: conjuring elemental lightning, conjuring the void lightning, conjuring fires from the different celestial heavens. We even brought down the celestial power as far as like density is concerned, as far as like density in light and the density of vibration. What would you say to people that are in hesitation between their terrestrial system and this system? What would you recommend to them to do between the people that are looking at Earth-based systems and looking at this system?
So kind of feel it out, but I definitely wouldn't take too long, because the way that I see it now is that I started out working celestial magic. That was what I was concerned with primarily. I didn't really care a lot for the terrestrial stuff, not because I didn't respect it, but because I just didn't really take a lot of time to actually pour through the literature and see what it was all about. I felt drawn more toward star type magic and planetary, and through a series of misadventures, I ended up not being in favor of the celestial stuff much anymore, because I realized that the mentality that I had toward magic was starting to change, and that was becoming harder to unify the two. And so I figured I had to take a break and understand. For me, that's what I felt I had to do anyway, was take a break from the one and understand how the other worked, and get to understand my mind like that. And now, the more that I did that, the more I got out of like the whole GD, Golden Dawn, OTO, all of that magic. And I started getting more into the chaos element, which started helping me to understand how that the fact that visceral and tangible manifestations were possible, but B, that I also needed to find a different system of magic if I was going to do that. And that puts you outside of your wheelhouse when you're so used to doing something for years. You can get comfortable with it, fall back on it, or have the temptation. And so I would do that, and I would go in and out, and eventually I would pop out all of that together and just try to regroup, because I was working now from the level of a fully functioning psychic, which is when we get into brain system. That led me to realizing that being plugged into the current that I am currently, where you draw all of those things from is of supreme importance, because where I was drawing it from before was not working at all. There was no ground wire. I was trying to be the ground wire, and it was all backing up on top of me, and it was kind of destroying my aura, I feel, in a lot of ways, because...
What systems were destroying your aura?
Yeah.
Yes,
Bunch of ceremonial
I'm
systems.
calling those fuckers out. Fuck them.
We're talking about everything from the Heptameron to, just the fucking technique solely would take fucking forever in order to do anything. We're talking about a year to 2 years before you see any manifestation as a indirect result of a ritual you did. And like I said, you're becoming the ground wire, but at what cost? Because all of the shit's kinking up on you and then just exploding throughout your life, like a bunch of chain reactions.
So tonight, or rather today, versus all of those years and months you've spent with other systems, what do you wish you had at hand?
Oh God, the clarity and concision. You know what I mean? The ability to focus this type of magic into one concise spell format, and to actually see the results yield in front of me. You know what I mean? Because if I would have known that, it would have taken so much of the guesswork out. It would have taken so much of the uh, insecurity away, because I would have been immediately immersed in my senses and all of this stuff. And I could have seen the back then when I had the creative ingenuity really honed and focused. I could have taken that and added it to the level of practicum that I have now with this, and the results would have just been stupid. It would have been nothing like.
I love it.
All right, it's so true though. It's like it wouldn't have. It's like, I was getting hints and pieces of it with the chaos magic, but it wasn't systematized at all. It wasn't in a direct current. It was like you're just drawing from random bits and pieces from the wellspring and hoping that you just got some good shit. You know what I mean? Like.
I agree. And now here's my question for you: Is have I gone overboard with the mathematics?
That will be my little bit of critique. Yes, I think so. But at the same time, you're also going to have those people who need that, you know what I mean, in order for it to be tangible. So, while at the same time, yes, for me, I think so, yeah. But that's because of the fact that I no longer personally feel like it's necessary for the casting of it. Not when you're plugged into the current. You see it, you become one with it. You can watch it work, you can watch it dance and be like, oh, this is cute. Like,
what was the visualization that you had in relation to the egg of the world?
You're talking about the wavelengths,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, so if you note that there are waveforms for the old Windows Media Player, and the way that they danced around in little patterns. It was similar to that, and it was almost like each of the individual bars that would make up a like almost on a pie graph chart, how it's going up and down, how it's fluctuating like that. I'm sorry, not a pie graph, goddammit, a bar graph, which is what I was trying to reference. Yeah, exactly. And there's different varied levels. And all of those would form different colors and whatnot, like an aurora borealis almost, when they would invert and then kind of like spread across the central line that amassed them together, and then they would, re-invert. And it was very interesting, very interesting.
Now you've conjured the servitor tonight, based on the elemental mechanics. You've also experienced the shadow servitor of before you did this.
Yeah.
How dense were they in comparison?
Freakishly. Freakishly. It was like being in another world of its own, and not, I wouldn't necessarily say cut off, but cut off, for lack of a better description. My descriptive powers have been defying me.
No, that's fantastic. Let's see, what are the questions that I have for you that are pertinent to tonight and today? For the people that are stuck in the OTO, AEO, AA, and the various other systematic traditions, what would you say to them?
I would say that if I could talk.
As you breathe out the energy.
I would say that I'm definitely going to bed after this now.
Yeah.
But systematic magic is important. It is important to have some form of basis of system, but it's definitely not everything, and that it will kill and drain any type of real results if you allow it to, because the creative spark, the creative impulse has to be a necessary component and vital, or else you're kind of kicking and stopping the flow, and that means that you're only experiencing partial manifestation, you know. And in my mind, that makes you an effective illusion if you're unable to conceive past, you know, what you can see, you know, which is well, we've always done this ritual for this thing, and it's always garnered results. It's like, yeah, but did anybody stop to ask if you could modify it and make it even more expedient? You know what I mean? Maybe it takes you 2 months, whereas somebody on the planet who's using a different means and is open to those means can do it in 2 days instead of 2 months. You know.
So I'd like to keep this at an hour. We've got about 4 minutes left. And we've gone through such an array of magic, right? And we've gone through such an array of systematizing a non-traditional application of this.
Indeed.
I'd like to bring this into the physical reality via the Academy of Sorcery. I'd like to bring this brick and mortar. I'd like to bring this into totemic representation via sigils, patches, and tapestry that we can bring into our own temple space. We can wear, as far as like those punk rock like fucking chaos that still exist. What would you say to those guys as far as what we can do when we bring this stuff tangible for them? When we start selling physical intermediaries that are sigilized and created specifically to be gates for this kind of magic?
Fucking get with it, scrub.
How do you mean?
I mean, it's to me, it's it's a no-brainer, because you're quite literally just patching into a node, and you're just adding it onto your personal effects in order to be able to channel a whole conduit, become a conduit of a whole slew of energy. You know what I mean? That's raw. That can be tapped and pulled from, you know, without restriction. You don't have to wait for certain hours of the day or anything like that. It's already plugged into all of those currents. The gateway's already open. You know, you have the ability to take the seal with you daily, or mat, or fucking portable scroll, or banner, or whatever have you, you know, and attach it to whatever it is you're doing, your business, your home life. You know, if you want to affect your family and friends, you stick it in your fucking window where it's visible, where people can have their realities changed by it as well as that of your own, you know.
So,
Yeah.
with regards to the DKMU 163 current, again, I mentioned like that and the OTO and the AA and the other established magics for the 120, 130 years that they've been exacerbated over improper translations of materia or whatever. What would you compare that magic as an independent system versus the stuff that you've experienced viscerally? Like, you've said so yourself. Like, these are things that you've experienced tangibly, especially today, in regards to the application of, I'm conjuring forth this spirit from this piece of wood that has never been before touched by this kind of magic.
Well, the interesting thing about all that is, right, is that you're doing highly personalized, custom tailored magic, right, which is intent, focus, energy, you know, all of that. And why I stress and emphasize the words and the wording that we use, right, was a word like this is a type of almost contract that you're making in the moment with yourself. You know, the words that you used are indicative of the change you seek to cause. Some of the wording on some of these is inextricably bound up in periods of time that no longer exist. So the context is completely lost on the magician. you have to wade through not only text that you don't understand and have to try to decipher and bring up to a modern context, but also a lot of the currents of these energies systems like the OTO, the AA, and whatnot. You're linking yourself via each person, right? So rather than having a natural current of energy to draw from, I'm drawing from the energy of the practitioners 9 times out of 10, which means you can get all kinds of weird, and we're not talking about it like how you and I were mentioning, we all have the same conduit to pull from, you know what I mean? Just the raw magic. We're talking about, you know, group egregors, and these group egregors are extensions of the co-creators of these systems, and you're tapping into that. So you're sharing with it and your view of reality, which means it's having as much effect over you as you are it. And that implicates in my mind that there is a limit of usefulness for their magic for you and vice versa. Because if your alignment no longer falls within the will of that system, then it affects you differently. With this, I haven't noticed that at all. It just feels like you're pulling from a raw current of energy, you know what I mean? Which is cool. It's really nice.
So, would you say that there's any gatekeepers to this system?
No, not at all. Haven't felt that, haven't experienced it, didn't feel like icky, you know what I mean? Like, you know, almost as if it was affecting my energy in a negative way or anything like that.
So, you would say that this is a sort of uplifting and ascension sort of like ascendancy, like.
Sure. If you were ever going to create a system that felt like it was put together for the purpose of building a community, I would definitely back this.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Thank you so very much tonight, Rex. I appreciate everything that you've said. I appreciate your heartfelt application of this. And I thank you. And to everybody that watches this, I wish you a very wonderful night. And I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the Spell a Day Challenge. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you tomorrow.